Hi, this is Tom Adams, and this is a foundations training video for the Shred Coach program. And I want to give this framework to you because I think it's really helpful. As an executive coach, I spend a lot of time talking with different companies, different of my clients, and one of the frameworks I have in the back of my head, and it helps me to place either planning that I'm hearing, issues that a client is facing within this structure. And this structure has been really helpful to me. And so today I want to give you an overview of the STOT framework. And so let's get started with the STOT framework. So initially, when I think about the STOT framework, it's really STOT is these four words: strategic, tactical, operational, transactional. Those are the four primary categories of this framework. And frameworks aren't necessarily always great in every situation, but they allow me to layer what I'm seeing, and I hope they allow you to layer what you're seeing. So when we think about it, strategic is really related to the vision, the mission, the objectives. Where are we going? Tactical is how do we make this happen? Like, how and when are we going to do that? Operational is we really take the strategic, understanding how we're and when we're going to do that, and we drive it into specific operational objectives, structures, systems, processes that are delivered transactionally, like day-to-day tasks and activities to create a results and outcome. And when I think about that, I often ask myself a question, right? So strategic is, what's the big why? When you think about Simon Sinek's work on your big why, why are we doing what we're doing? So if you have strategic objectives, which is to build a certain size of business, to do a certain type of thing, to engage in a certain type of destruction operation that you're leading, there's often a why behind it. You're either trying to build a new business that generates X amount of revenue for you. There's a why behind it for you. Then tactically, there's this whole area, this question of how and when. So if why is strategic, then how and when is tactical. How are we going to do this, and when are we going to do this? And the how is like, what's going to accomplish the strategic goal or strategic objective we're setting. When is the time frame for that? In the next quarter, in the next year, in the next 10 years. But generally, we'll talk a little bit more about that. The what is, what are we going to do to deliver this how and when to support the why? And in that what becomes the mechanism that we then get the who's to do the things they need to do, the tasks, the activities, everything that needs to happen to create the results and outcome. So when you think about this, there's some questions behind it. But let's just take what I've kind of written on top of this, and as you can see, I'm using my pen to talk through it a little bit more. But if your why, let's call your why the thing that supports your big, hairy, audacious goal. So if you have a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is your big what, the thing you want to accomplish related to your mission and your vision and your objectives, but that why is really, let's call it your big, hairy, audacious goal. Let's just call it that for the sake of calling it something. And so that's driving your what. Now, out of that comes your tactical, and this is your initiatives. You know, you've heard about strategic initiatives. I believe strategic initiatives are mostly tactical. Like they're the things that we go, this is where we're going. This is what we want to accomplish, but this is how we're going to do that. They're quarterly plans. In entrepreneurial operating system language, they're your rocks. In other language, they're your big KPIs. By a certain date, we're going to do this thing in this way to support our strategic objectives. The what is really the processes, the tools, the systems. That's the operational side of things. And then transactional is who does how and what today. How do we do the tasks of the business to support us all the way back here? So when you think of the STOT framework, that's what we're thinking of. I like to think about it sometimes using this framework in terms of the time frames on it. Strategic to me is in the 1 to 5 year range. Like if I'm trying to accomplish a big, hairy, audacious goal, then I'm thinking 1 to 5 years. Jim Collins, when he developed that concept of the big, hairy, audacious goal, and hats off to Jim Collins because that's his word. He couched that in a 10-year cycle, but most of the companies Jim Collins dealt with were large, publicly traded companies, large enough to support the kind of research he did. I think 10 years plans are really difficult for small businesses. So I tend to think strategically in terms of that 1 to 5 year mark. Tactical tends to live in the quarterly or yearly framework. Like it's not years out, it's this year. This is how we're going to accomplish what we need to accomplish this year. We plan within those years. Plans generally evolve in quarters and years. That's where tactical initiatives and tactical directions happen. They generally happen Q1 through Q4. That's how they're delivered. Operational are weekly and monthly. Again, if operational is supervisory, it's the management systems of the business. It's the process, the procedures, the structure, the systems, and how they're developed. Those live in here, and they really support what we're trying to do tactically. And it's the connecting mechanism that helps to manage the operations of the business, the transactional activity. And transactional stuff happens hourly, daily, by minute. Sometimes they happen every quarter, but generally speaking, transactional activities are between clients and us on a regular basis, supporting the results and outcomes of the business. You'll notice that these all work together. They flow together. So strategic, tactical, operational, and it's not that any one has a particular priority. They're just different ways of thinking, and they're a structure, they're a framework that you can set things on top of. So let's look at a quick example of this framework, say for a startup, a shredding business. So let's say somebody wants to get into the business and they're thinking in the 3 to 5 year mark, and they want to create a shredding business that generates $1 million in revenue, that has a 20% EBITDA. They want to do a plant-based operation, and they want to do it in a specific city or the surrounding area. So that's the strategic thinking they're doing. So, and then for me, I would ask them, and I would try and dig in, well, why do you want $1 million, and why does 20% EBITDA matter to you? And often when you dig into that, you discover things like, I like this industry, I like this business, I've seen the value of it, and really what I want to do is provide a good living for myself and my family, and I want to create some residual. This 20% EBITDA ultimately allows me to buy a building that then generates my personal wealth. That's a big why. And that's why a strategic plan supports the big why. All right. Well, if somebody's got that as their strategic planning, and that's where they're going as their big, hairy, audacious goal, then when we think tactically, this person's going to have to think about, okay, how are we going to deliver that, and when are we going to deliver that? And well, the only thing you can do is start the next, what's right in front of me? Well, I've got to start figuring out who my vendors are going to be. What equipment am I going to buy? Who are my partners going to be? Which niche or positioning am I going to take in the marketplace? I'm obviously going to be a plant-based business, but how am I going to position myself in the market compared to who's already there? Do I have a target vertical that I'm going to go after, a target market? I'm going after hospitals or lawyers. Am I going to consider long-term adding medical waste or adding other related activities to what I'm doing? What kind of capital do I need to get to do this? And that's the tactical way we start approaching this strategy, or this strategic approach we're taking. Then once we kind of get that figured out and we define when we're going to do Q1, Q2, Q3, then we start going into, okay, what's our marketing plan? How are we going to think about pricing? What are we going to do with agreements? How are we going to plan hiring? Who's going to be my first hire? Who's going to be my second hire? Which building am I going to rent? All of that stuff becomes operational in an initial startup. And then transactionally is, Well, there's all the transactions that need to support engaging some of this early startup stuff. But once you've got it in place, then, start doing sales calls. And do we set up a Google Ads? And do we have a website to support that? And what routes are we going to do? And how are we going to bill? And who's going to answer the phones? And what are we going to do with the paper that we bail? All of those become transactional activities for a startup. Does that make sense? Let's look at somebody who's already established, and let's say a mobile shredding operation is already established, and they're humming along nicely at 2.5-3 million in revenue, and they go, we want to expand to a brand new city. And so a brand new city, this expansion of our territories is a strategic goal. Well, what's the why behind that strategic goal? Well, it might be to build a more stable business, to be more prepared to have a stronger presence, to build ultimately more profit. Let's say they want a 20% revenue growth to support new equipment. So that's the strategy. Now the tactic is, how do we do that? Well, we're going to have to get the capital to support the investments we need to make with new equipment, with new people in a specific city. So let's define the city. That's a tactic. Let's set some timelines to do that in the next quarter or the next year. Now, when we go operationally, well, what are we thinking? We're thinking, well, who's going to drive? What truck are we going to get? Who's going to drive those trucks? How are we going to market to this city? What kind of campaigns are we going to have to engage to make that happen? What's our pricing model going to be? How are we going to pull that all together, right? So we know what we're trying to do in terms of and the big why. We're pretty clear on the things that we're going to have to do in the time frame. What are the big initiatives we're taking? Then we pull that all together. So ultimately, we get to do the transactional stuff, which is answer phones, fill out forms, construct routes, go and shred paper for people, or shred hard drives, or deal with the destruction requirements of our customers, deal with the paper or the output of that. That's where you're going ultimately, is to get to a transactional result that supports the results and outcomes you want from your business. Finally, if you understand that, then I just want to hit quickly why we do this. Like, what's the importance of this? First and foremost, I think it's a framework. Again, it's a framework for thinking or acting or planning or leading. It's really important to go, is this strategic or is this transactional? It's really helpful when I think about this if I'm talking to a client and he or she is explaining something to me, one of the things that happens in my head as I go, is this a transactional issue or is this a strategic issue? Is this a operational thing that isn't clearly defined because we don't know what the tactic is? It's really understanding where this fits in the framework. As I think, as I act, as I plan, as I deal with problems, it's a helpful model to work from. Second is, it gives me boundaries as an owner. It gives you boundaries as an owner to know where you should spend your time and energy. Owners, leaders, executives of shredding operations need to spend as much time as possible over here in strategic and tactical. Now, if you're a startup, you're in your first quarter or your first year of operation, I fully expect you're going to be down here doing transactional and operational activities. But a lot of times what happens when I talk to owners who are struggling and frustrated, what they're doing is spending transactional time. They're spending all their time over here in transactional. And one of the things I'm helping them to do is come back here. You got to be strategic and tactical. Yes, you might have to dip into operational, but you need to get out of that. So I work to construct boundaries between these layers so owners and executives stay out of them and hire to support themselves in these areas. Thirdly, it helps me to think about who works where and when. We hire labor. We hire team members often to do the transactional activity. We hire supervisors and managers to manage the operations. We as owners and executives tend to live up in these zones. And when you understand this, it helps you to understand how to structure your business, how to think about it, how to layer an accountability chart or an org chart based on these layers. And so I give that to you because it's such an important framework to work from. Again, all frameworks are mucky in some way. They don't always work. They're not hard lines like you see on this chart. They're really kind of loose lines, but they're ways to help you think through. And I hope as I've talked about this one, you've got a good sense of the STOT framework and how it can help you to think about thinking, acting, planning, and leading in your business. That's another foundational topic that I wanted you to make sure you got, and lots more to come. Hope that helps. Thanks. Bye.